All right, thank you all for staying behind. This is going to be um, perhaps a very informative presentation, an opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about this whole story. I mean, if you've read some of the Toronto Star articles, there are multiple stages. There's a whole series of events over a period of years as to how Neveah ended up in Rosedale, we could say. So thank you to Mr. Irwin Elman. We met last year. Was it that? Yeah, we met last year. And I think, did you reach out to us, or we reached out to you, or we met somewhere in the middle?
I reached out to you to thank you.
Okay, right, that's right.
Yeah.
So because of our initial first anniversary service, Irwin reached out to us to express his gratitude, the fact that we at RPC did not forget Neveah, and we haven't. And so we've since met at least once. We've talked a couple of times. And for this anniversary service, I really wanted Irwin to be here. Irwin is the former Child and Youth Advocate of Ontario. And I say former, not because he's not good at his job. I think he was too good at his job.
I'm retired.
Well, if you all know math, you can put two and two together. Part of his responsibility, I'm presuming to speak for him, but part of his responsibility was to monitor this whole system. So Irwin shared with me that when he first heard about Neveah's story, he had a very strong inkling as to what happened. And he was correct, unfortunately, because he has seen this several times before. I'm not stealing your thunder, am I?
No,
Okay.
I have no thunder.
So this is our opportunity to ask questions. He knows this story very, very well, very intimately. And we have Jennifer Pagliaro. She really wanted to be here as well, but she was out of town this weekend, so she has prepared a pre-recorded message just by way of introduction and to give a brief overview from her perspective as a reporter. And she and Irwin know each other quite well. They've worked together over a period of years. So that's how we got connected to Jennifer. So I'll play Jennifer's clip, and then I'll hand it over to Irwin.
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Pagliaro with the Toronto Star. I'm really sorry Wendy and I can't join you for the memorial today. Wendy just became a mom, and I'll be out of town when you see this. But we really wanted to say how amazing it is that you continue to honor Neveah's memory every year, even when we didn't know her name. Wendy and I first started working on Neveah's story when we heard about the discovery of her body in your community. We had a similar reaction I'm sure many of you had. It was a horrible and really sad moment for the city. As journalists, it's our job to report these tragedies so they don't go unnoticed, and that people simply don't die in this city without explanation, especially kids. We know investigators were frustrated not to be able to identify her immediately, and we felt the same. It felt wrong not to know who she was. So while there weren't stories for several months, we didn't forget about her, and we now know investigators in this case were exhausting all leads and tools to identify Neveah, and it's because of them that we know her name. Her story came back onto our radar when we got a tip about a court decision posted online. That was the decision in the child protection case for Neveah's siblings. It revealed a lot of new details about Neveah's life and death. Most importantly, it confirmed that she had been the responsibility of the Children's Aid Society for most of her life. Once we learned that, we asked the court to release documents related to her case. Child protection cases are usually under publication ban, but we argued it was in the public interest to know what happened to her not only in death, but also in life. It's really critical to us as journalists who represent the public that the systems in place to protect children work as they're supposed to. And in this case, we now know that Neveah was continuously failed by those systems. We hope that there can continue to be public accountability in Neveah's death. Irwin will be able to tell you more about why a coroner's inquest could be part of that, and we're really grateful to him for continuing to be an advocate for vulnerable children. We are still asking the coroner's office, the premier, and his minister about a possible inquest, and we are hopeful that there will be a public investigation into her case, which we will, of course, cover. Thank you so much for caring about Neveah and for reading our stories. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Evan. Let me just say my heart's kind of full from your memorial, your service. It's unique. I've been involved in working with vulnerable children and youth for 45 years now. I'm retired now, all across the province and across Canada, really. This is a unique event, a unique moment. And I want to, when I say I'm grateful, or when Jennifer said she's grateful, I want to just take a few minutes to explain why. Because you, right now, this morning in your service, you, I don't know a way of saying it, but you did an act of good. You did something that changed the world. And it's full of goodness, and I want to explain that. And I don't even think you realize. So let me say a couple things. So about Jennifer, and when she mentioned Wendy Gillis and Jennifer Pagliaro, they're the two star investigative reporters that heard about Neveah before we knew who Neveah was. Probably just close to the time you may have heard of her in this community and decided that they needed to understand what happened, who was she, and what happened. They worked with the police, the Toronto Police Service, which was involved in Neveah's life, as it turns out, but certainly doggedly tried to figure out who she was and how did she die. We wouldn't be here talking if it wasn't for those star reporters. We wouldn't, because what we know now, and we don't know everything, but what we know now is really just only because of the research and efforts of those two reporters. So I give gratitude to them. Even when I was the child advocate, I used to tell them they were child advocates too, and I would say to people like you, you are child advocates in your own right. So here's the pieces I wanted to say. What we know about Neveah. So we know, and I think it's really important to think of her as you do, a human being, a person. And we know she was black. We know she was Jamaican background, although she was born here. She was autistic. She's on the autism spectrum, nonverbal. We know that she loved to move. She loved to move, from what I've heard from the reporters and what they wrote. They heard that she loved to move. She was a wanderer, right? So she would wander around her apartment, wander outside the building. That's why, in fact, police would get involved, because she'd be wandering and somebody would phone 911 and she'd have to get returned home. She loved, she was in foster care. I mean, she was taken from her mom's at some point. I'll explain that if you want, and lived in a foster home for 2 years of her life. And in that foster home, her foster parents would say she loved to be moved. If she was in a stroller and going through the park, loved it. If she was in a shopping cart, in the grocery store, and she was being wheeled around in the shopping cart, loved it. And she was, her foster parent, foster mom said she was very bright smile, and she was very loving. And she said, and that is something that I read, that really was powerful to me. She said she expressed her love by touching her face. So if you held her, she'd be smiling. And remember, she's nonverbal, so she'd just touch your face to make you know that she loves you, and you could touch her face. Very loving child. And it's really important to do that. So if we end up talking about systems or how or what, that we remember at the center of it is this really precious little child. Yeah. So I want to say one more thing before I just end to the final point I wanted to make. That, in case you don't know, the Children's Aid Society is an organization. There's 45 in Ontario. It's an organization whose job by law, it's one of the only organizations that support families or children that has a law that tells them what to do, called the Child and Youth Family Services Act. So by law, the Children's Aid is given the duty and the power to protect children. And its job is to decide if a child is being physically, emotionally, or sexually abused or neglected, and if so, to intervene. They have the power to investigate. All of us have a duty to report concerns about a child to the Children's Aid in our area. If you're a professional working with children, you have an obligation, not just a duty, that you can be charged if you don't report a concern. And the Children's Aid's job, under law, is to investigate whether the concerns are well-founded, and if they are, to take action. It's a little inside baseball, but it's important for you to know if you want to know, think about Neveah. And the Children's Aid, through court, because it goes to court, it's a legal process, and Children's Aid have legal powers. If they can decide these concerns are unfounded and we're not concerned, they can close what they would say call the case. They can say, we're not going to do anything. They can talk to the family and say, we would like you to voluntarily work with us until we're not concerned anymore about whatever is going on. They can go to court and say, we want the court to force the parents or parent to work with us. Or they can go to court and say to the court, we want to remove the child from their home temporarily until something changes in the child's home. Or they can say to the court, we want you to allow us to remove the child, and that child will stay with us until at least they're 18 permanently. Maybe we can adopt them, maybe we'll find some other permanent solution, but that child would become our responsibility to care for that child, because the parents just are not going to be able to do that. Children's Aid's role, that is their job. So, to get around to where I want to go with this, and why what you do is so important. Right now, we're standing in the shadow of what's called Youth and Care Day in Ontario, May 14th. That's a day which is legislated. There is a law passed that every May 14th is a day to celebrate the strength and courage and potential of children who are removed from their parents and are living outside of their parents' home by the Children's Aid Society. They're living in a foster home or a some other form of residential care. Maybe they're living in what's called kinship care. This is the day to recognize them, celebrate them. The day was created about, it's over 12 years now, maybe 13 years. It was created because young people who were in care, teenagers and a little bit older, who were in care, held these hearings at the legislature. It's called the Youth Leaving Care hearings. So they went to the legislature and said, we want to hold hearings with our office, at the time, supported them to do that. And the legislature said, sure, you can have a committee room and you can have your own hearings and invite people, and they wanted to hold hearings about how it could be better for children who live in care. And 700 people over 2 days came to those hearings. It was a big shock to me, probably to the young people who organized them and held those hearings. They were the ones listening to testimony. They asked the minister to come and testify. They asked the head of the Children's Aid Society to come and testify. Bureaucrats, other young people, foster parents, social workers, they asked anybody. They had 700 people come. They could only hear maybe 70 or 80 different pieces of testimony, but there was a lot of people in the legislature at the time. And out of the hearings, they wrote a report. It's called My Real Life Book. And it's their report. It's really good if you want. It was written by them. And I wanted to tell you, in that report, they have 7 themes. I'm not going to go through them, but I'll just read them. They said, we are vulnerable. We are isolated. We are left out of our own lives. No one is really there for us. Care is unpredictable. Care ends and we struggle. All that's true, the report tells you from testimony they heard and their experience, because they wrote it, so it's written in their experience, from their point of view. It's very powerful. But I want to tell you, the reason I mention it is because Neveah's mom was in care. So not only Neveah was in care, her mom was in care. We know that from the Toronto Star. Her mom was in care at the age of 12, and her mom's mom, I guess her grandmom, was involved in drugs and drinking, and Neveah's mom was taken into care when the police were called, and Neveah's mother was found alone, and her own mother was passed out on a couch, and Neveah's mom was in a difficult state. And so at 12, the Children's Aid said, you're coming to live with us. That's the life that Neveah's mom would have lived. And then at 18, Neveah's mom's on her own and has her own children and doesn't get any more I can't say that because I don't know what I don't know. Seemingly doesn't have the support she needs for autistic children. By now she has 2, and then even during Neveah's life has 2 more. But there's 2 autistic children she has, and without support, coming from that life I just explained, and now has to parent. And Neveah is her life story, her history is part of that history. So, why what you're doing is so important. One of the things that young people who wrote My Real Life Book, they did 2 things. One was they demanded a day, they didn't say May 14th, they just said, we want a day where the public, the province, needs to know about us. Because you, government, through Children's Aid, are taking us from our homes, bringing us into care, and you don't even know us. We're invisible to you. I mean, that idea of being invisible, they feel, right? We're invisible to you. Maybe you hear about us when we're little babies, or when we're dead. But when we're alive, there's tens of thousands of us. You don't even know what's happening to us, what our life is like, and we want people to acknowledge us. Your Reverend talked about that today. So amazing that he sees it without knowing, I bet, all the stuff I'm saying, but how acknowledgement of a person seeing somebody is an act of goodness. And so they created this day. The government at the time said, we're going to give you this day. They also asked for fundamental change. We're not quite there yet. That young people, that was their other big demand. But the government said, we'll create this day. It's going to be May 14th, which is the day you released your report. Because we always want the province to remember that report and your voice, and we want to see you. And the young people feel, and I can tell you from at least 100 young people that know this is happening today, who used to be in care or still are in care. Most of the people I know used to be in care because I'm old now, and they got older too. They know you're doing this. And when you see Neveah, when systems didn't, if you getting the details of how did she get, what happened with the Children's Aid Society, how did that happen? She wasn't seen. The Star called her the invisible girl on purpose, right? But you see her, and you continue to see her. Every year you see her. And you refuse, this is how young people might say, you refuse to look away. You refuse. And in that refusal to look away, you are doing, you mentioned a Jewish saying, you are doing a mitzvah. You are doing something that's good for the world. You are doing healing the world by not looking away. And it's a message to the young people in care. They hear it. The young people who could be Neveah, there, but for the grace of God, they're not. You see them. It's very, very powerful. And for that, I can't speak for them, but I know they're grateful. I'm grateful that you do this, and you're just sitting here listening to me. So I want to just thank you for that. And that was why it was so important. One, I want to be part of remembering Neveah with you, but it's so important for me to be here. And I know Jennifer and Wendy, I asked, we talked, and they wanted to be here for the same reason, because they feel it too, that they don't want to look away. So thank you. I'm happy to answer questions about what I know and what I've read, or how I can explain what happened, if that's of interest, or anything about Neveah that I might be able to add. So I'll leave it at that. That's okay. So open to questions. I'm going to sit down if you don't mind. Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
Susan Peeper.
Oh, right. Hi,
Yeah.
Sue. Oh, you're with. Yeah, I know you have
Yeah.
experience with this system.
I do. It's been a while. But this was a question I had when I was working in the system way back then, and I still have it. So, in these cases, unfortunately, there's too many. Children's Aid Societies often are believed. Sometimes particularly. But one is too many. And so, what is going on with Children's Aid Societies that these kind of things happen? And how can they be fixed? And then the second question is more local to us. If we have resources, financial, time, whatever, what else could we do as a company?
Yeah, well, let me say first before I get to what you could do, because that's always, those two questions you asked are always the ones.
Yeah.
They're so tricky. I know you get asked too. What can we do? How can we fix this? Oh, if I knew how to fix it, I would have suggested that a long time ago. It's complicated, right? It's big. the fix is big. So let me say one thing about, it's true, Children's Aid, boy. So if you read what happened to her, if you read the Star articles, you can't walk away from saying, oh my gosh, and how do we hold this organization accountable for what happened? I get that. What I want to say is that it's not about, for me, at first I used to get really angry at hearing these things. I'm not sure I get angry at that anymore, because I'm not sure who I should be angry about. It's not about any person. It makes no sense to, there's social workers involved, there's a director involved, there might be ministry people involved, but to be angry at those individuals is silly, because they are trying. I've met people, they're trying to do their best. They want to do good in the world. They did not want this to happen. It's not just a matter of mistakes, it's a systemic, they're caught, those people, even the ministry policymakers, the social workers, they're caught in a system that's really trying to do one thing, this is my opinion, and built to do another. So anything I say is not about any person, and I do think that in Neveah's case, there are many times, instances when workers were in the family. So Neveah was living at home, and this might sound familiar to you. Neveah was living at home, and a social worker came to visit Neveah because they were supervising the family. That's the language, supervising the family. And the worker said, oh, how's Neveah doing? And the mom said, oh, she's at daycare. Okay, thanks. And the worker would go away, and at least one of those times when that happened, Neveah was actually, the police think, probably dead. And the law, I mean, we had this before, and this what frustrates me, we had it before where there was a case, a young girl in Parkdale called Caitlin Sampson, you might remember, and I was the advocate then, and we asked for an inquest, and the law was changed because young people said, you cannot make a decision about a child without talking to the child. And that, because the same kind of thing happened to this little girl, Caitlin. The workers said, well, whatever her mom said, fine. They never bothered to see Caitlin. And in this case, never followed through to see Neveah. And the law was changed to say workers are not supposed to do that. See the child. She's a human being. See the child. Meet with the child. And try and give the child a say in what happens to her. It's not just, is she alive or not? That's a pretty low bar, right? And it didn't happen again when it shouldn't. And the question to me is why? And I think bigger term, bigger picture. You know how I described the way life in care is, right? When young people said that, when they released their book, when the government heard it, it was really the first time where it was all right in the province to say living in care is awful. Used to be if you said it, you were sort of anti-Children's Aid. But this, everybody knew it. So what the young people said in that book was not a secret to anybody who touches the lives of someone. The ministry, Children's Aid, politics, doesn't mean they wanted it to be that way, but it wasn't a secret. And so when young people put it to the public, it was now open secret. And there was, rather than, in my opinion, an effort to figure out how to make it better, because I don't know if they, and it's possible, didn't know how. The answer was, if life and care is no place in a child, where should a child be? A child should be with their family. And so that was the opposite. Living in care is no place for a child. A child should be with their family. And there was, and it is, in the children's aid system, even though it's a child protection system, it's built to do child protection, there's a tension where workers are sometimes caught. Should we bring this child into care, or should we try and support the family? Even though there's no resources in the community, should we try and support the family? It's better to leave them in the family. And there's this pressure to do that, even though common sense might tell them, no, my job in terms of child protection is to bring the child into care. But I know that's a bad decision. So the workers are caught in this, what I'd say, Hobson's choice. Like, what's the right thing to do for a child? And for me, the bigger solution, this is just me. If we're going to have child protection, people do child protection, get a call, investigate, decide what needs to be done, and at the same time, build a family support system. To create a system where every child gets what they need when they need it. So there's not 80,000 children on a wait list for autism services, because we see what happens to children and families when there's no supports. And just one simple example. But the two systems need to be separate because it's really confusing to families and to the children's aid workers if they have to do both. Be the support system and the police and supervising families. It's really confusing. And so that's the big solution that would take, I think you know, enormous change, cultural change for a province, for the systems. But that's the bigger solution, I think. What we can do, I know young people would say there are two really important things that make a difference in their lives. And this is any child, but certainly children in care. One is acknowledge us, see us, think about us, understand us as humans. So talk to each other, talk to other people. Don't see us as bad kids or needy kids. We're just kids. We're just regular old kids. So think of us. The second thing they say is one thing that will lead to our success, even in all this stuff, if we have supportive, at least one supportive adult in our life. And that's true of children, all children. And sometimes it's not, if you think about it, every study says that. And they call it one-person theory. So if you think about it, I'm going to pick on you, but in your life, who was it, somebody that made a difference in your life? Even, give me an example of somebody else.
Teachers.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can you remember one?
Yeah. My grade 6 teacher.
Which, he or she? What'd she do?
She had a connection with the kids, and for me, she inspired me. I love words and literature, specifically.
Yeah, you can remember her. What's her name?
Megan Jukes.
Megan Jukes, Miss Jukes. And she may be alive, I'm not sure. Yeah? Does she know you?
I don't know. I should reach out to her. I don't
No. But here's what young people said to me. Because they say that, and it's surprising, not just them, but when I ask people like us, mine is a grade 70. It's amazing how often a teacher comes up, right? Grade 9 teacher.
Yeah.
But here's what the young people, when I said that to me, I remember them in the meeting saying to Irwin, mine was Mr. Klepke, or Miss Jukes. He said, do you think Mr. Klepke remembers a time he did this thing? Because I'm a terrible writer, but he tried to convince me I was a writer. And I remember him making a fuss in class about one piece of my writing, which was terrible, but he did it in order to make me, encourage me to keep going, right? he never told me that, but I figured that out. Probably in university, I figured it out. So Mr. Kletke, I love that guy. So they said, Irwin, do you think Mr. Kletke remembers you? Maybe. He wouldn't recognize, of course, I'm old, so if I showed up. Okay, but let's give him, they said, fine. Let's say he will remember you. Do you think he will remember that time when he read your story in front of the class? I'm going, no, there's no way, right, that he could remember doing that. Or even he might not even remember my story, right? I don't know what he would remember about me. They said, yeah, we don't think he would either. But here's the cool thing. Mr. Kletke wouldn't even know that now you're in front of Presbyterian, Rosedale Presbyterian Church, and you're talking about how he did something, and you're telling so many degrees of separation. He wouldn't know that that little act he did made that big a difference in your life. But it's proof, Irwin, that you have the ability, and you better, because I was working with young people in and from care then, you better do it intentionally and remember that when you do things, you have the ability to affect our lives. And you know it because you've already lived it. And I'd say that to you guys, right? So when you're with children, if you want to volunteer, but you don't have to. When you're with children, if you're an employer and you have young people working for you, just remember, be intentional that you can change their life. But you'll never know, which is okay, because if we're standing in this church, we're okay with not having to know and having faith, right? You will never know that you changed your life, but you have faith that it will because it changed your life. And that's how I think if you really want to make a difference, if we want to make a difference as individuals, that's something to remember. Because all of us touch children's lives in one way or another, in so many ways, and we never know. That would be what I'd say. See, I'm going to try and give shorter answers. Okay.
Maybe it's a good question to ask, and maybe one doesn't know this yet, but do they have any idea what happened to her?
Like how she died?
Yeah.
Physically? No. Well, I would say the last time I talked to Jennifer and Wendy, they'd say no. I haven't talked to the police. The police haven't closed the case. I would say the mom says, I think, I'll just say in case you haven't read the articles, the mom said what happened was she was at Tim Hortons and very upset and crying. The mom was very upset and crying, and she had Neveah with her, and two people, John and Mary, came up to her and said, oh, we notice you're upset, you're having trouble. You know, I guess she must have told them Neveah was autistic, and they said, well, we have the services that we run that support Neveah. If you give her to us, she can live with us, and we know how to care for her. And the mom says, so I gave Neveah to them and, avoided telling the Children's Aid or anything else. But the police found this person, John, and decided John had nothing to do with it, but they can't find the person, Mary, right? So how did Neveah actually die? The police, because they can't even decide when did she die. I mean, when she was found, it's awful to say, but her body was so decomposed it could be months to a year, right? So they can't tell how she died or when she died. But that's the story. The case isn't closed, so they're still investigating. My understanding is the police officers are as maybe traumatized. They would hate that word if I called police officers traumatized. They're as moved by what's happened as anyone, and are they don't want to close that case, right? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Irwin, you mentioned the role of the Star reporters in keeping public profile of the issue. I'm just thinking about how to keep that up. And there had been mention of the possibility of holding a coroner's inquest into the gaps, and that sometimes coroner's inquests can be useful in terms of having a good long look at the system that permitted things to go wrong and how to fix it. Could you give an opinion as to whether you think this would be useful in this case, and if so, like how do coroner's inquests happen? Like what perhaps there are things that we could do or people we could talk to help keep that issue alive.
Yeah, well, okay. So, inquest, the coroner is permitted under law. He has a law too, and he can call an inquest into the death of any individual or groups of individual in Ontario. And he has different coroners in different regions of the province, and usually it's the regional coroner who can call an inquest, not the coroner. But the coroner can call what he calls discretionary inquests. And a discretionary inquest is like a province-wide, where he can say, so the coroner of Ontario's name is Dr. Heyer, he's a really good guy, can say, and this is his criteria, I think it's in the interest of the province to understand how Neveah, in this case, died in order to prevent other Neveahs from happening. So his motto is, I speak for the dead to protect the living. And an inquest is a legal process where any entity that has, this is the language, an interest in learning more about the death of Neveah can apply for what's called standing at the inquest, and he can order different entities to be there. So he can say to the Children's Aid Society of Toronto or York Children's Aid or the Toronto Police, if they don't come forward, which they would, he can say, you must have standing. If that happens, those organizations with standing can have a lawyer that asks questions, and there's a jury, 12 people, who are selected from a jury pool. So somebody here could be on that jury, and the jury listens to all the discussion about what happened, and the jury's duty is to make recommendations. The idea of an inquest is not to find blame. That's not the purpose. There are other systems for that. I'll be honest with you, because my office used to always ask for standing and bring young people forward and have young people have their voice heard at the hearing, at the inquest. It is, really when lawyers, no offense to lawyers, but when lawyers get involved, it's adversarial. Like the Toronto Police are going to make sure the crap doesn't get spilled on them, so they're going to make sure somebody else gets blamed. And Children's Aid and the ministry, it's a very adversarial process, even though it's not supposed to be. I wish it could be more pure. I think the coroner, Dr. Heyer, wishes it could be less adversarial and more, can't we come together and figure out what went wrong and how to do this. That's the inquest. The challenge, I think they're good. I think they're good because it allows things to be seen publicly. They're good if what the inquest is allowed to talk about is broad enough so that it can be bigger than just finding out the worker didn't, how I said, see Neveah at the time. Yeah, we know that, and that worker is emotionally paying the price, and I'm sure somebody in the system said something to them about you. How could you not? We know this, right? The question is, why didn't that worker do it to me? And that's a systemic thing. So I do think there should be an inquest. The problem is, the coroner's law says you cannot have an inquest while there's a police investigation going on. Makes sense. I get it, because the police don't like anything to interfere with a criminal investigation. but it's an open case. It's not a closed case. As long as it remains open, coroner can't call an inquest. How long is it going to be remaining open? It could be years and years before the coroner could even decide to call inquest. I think there'll be enough pressure on the coroner to do that, but what's happened, I'm thinking about my friend from the ministry who was there, knows that you have an inquest 10 years after Neveah had died, which means you're looking at things happened 10 years ago, and then the government, and even though I would argue the system hasn't fundamentally changed, there can be this narrative that, oh, we've changed all that now. So any recommendations you're making, jury, it doesn't matter because we've changed it. So the question to me is, what could the coroner do? And there are tools. What could we do that allows us to look right now at what happened? And the last thing I'd want to say is, I laughed when I said, oh, there could be an inquest. I was thinking in my head, the Reverend doesn't know this, I was saying, I wonder if you would want standing at that inquest. And the reason I think about you, and I'd be curious what you said, and what about this community. I think when these things happen in communities, like in Parkdale, I was mentioning the other child who died, Caitlin, but here in Neveah, when communities find, when those children, when something happens in their community, it traumatizes community. And maybe there's a different word, but you were talking about it today where, no, that's now part of our lives now. And we've thank goodness, you've not turned away from it. You're going to embrace and say, how is that? You're going to reflect on it. How has that deepened our faith? How has it changed how we see the world, even if it's just a little? You're not turning away, but it changes the community. And I remember writing the mayor and saying, where did the mayor, I think I asked Reverend Mr. Did the mayor reach out to you? Did the mayor come to this community and say, hey, do you need, if there's any, I'm not saying you do, because you got each other. Do you need counselors? Do they acknowledge that when Neveah died, it's your loss in your community? You found Neveah. That's a problem, but we don't do it. And I think the reason we don't do it, and we don't do it especially when there are children who are connected to children's aid care. One, because it's that thing about blame, right? It's like, oh, if we do, we're going to be seen as blaming the children's aid or blaming the police or blaming somebody instead of looking after each other. And I think there are things for communities to say about what they went through, what they're thinking, what recommendations they have. And I was thinking about that. And and that's why I reached out to Reverend. When I first read about your response, and your response, sir, was like, wow. Very insightful, very powerful, and I want to just reach out and say thank you. And it was, I don't want to be over prideful, so I didn't want to offer anything. I just wanted to express gratitude, right? But I was thinking about what you needed and who was looking after your community. And yeah, I'll go back there and then.
You mentioned the idea of bullying. Do the police think a crime was committed here?
Yeah, I think they do, yes. I don't think, well, there is a crime that was committed because whether, I just say it plainly, whether Neveah was murdered or whether she died of natural causes and then her body was just disposed, there's a crime. What I haven't talked to them, but I think right now they probably in their heads are thinking the simplest answer is most likely the answer. And the simplest answer to them would be something happened and whether that mother lost her or disposed of the body, then I'm sure they're still thinking as she's the prime suspect, but I don't know. Well, she travel across the city at 4 and with nonverbal autistic kid, end up in Rosedale and climb up in a dumpster. That didn't happen, no.
Is it against the law to give your child away to strangers?
Yeah, it's a good question, right?
One would think that.
So child abandonment is a law, right? Yeah, so you can't abandon your child, and you are responsible for the choices you make as a parent in allowing children. We all do that, right? If we go away for a weekend or something, we have our aunt come or a sister-in-law, or this is me speaking, right? We do that all the time. So it's not against the law to do that. In these circumstances, could the police charge the mom with child abandonment just going by her story? They could. I don't know if they'd make it stick because she didn't really know these people. It's obviously bad judgment. Mom now says she wished she didn't do that. And I think they think that there's more to the story than what they know.
The other question, you brought out a few times the idea of Neveah being invisible and his children invisible, not being seen and so on. But when she was moved back into the mother's care, she was in a stable and secure foster family, as far as I understand.
Yep, for her first 2 years of life, yeah.
And then she was taken from that situation because there was something to do with different sort of jurisdiction, and people had to make the decision to take her from that stable family and put her in this other situation with her mother who was known to have been involved. The people who did that were experts. The people in the child care society, presumably social workers, there was a judge involved who was involved in that decision. And these are the people, not us, they have the expertise. And I sort of see, along with the medical not seeing her, that there was willful blindness on the part of the professionals to take this child and put her in a dangerous situation. And I don't know, is there something I'm missing in that? What is it that they don't know that would allow, are they hoping things would get better, she goes back with mom? Where is that, it's like a blindness, and they're charged with the protection of the child.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Is there something in our society that can't face the pain of the child's pain?
Yeah, I have a whole, I think about that a lot, and you're right. Your analysis of what happened, and it goes beyond that because you're right. There was a judge and lawyers and the social workers, many social workers, supervisors making that decision. 2 years in a foster home, she's doing well. The foster mom says, we love her, she's part of our family, and she goes back to her mom. Remember, too, that in the next year or a year and a half, the court there's many more calls to 911 about Neveah. The Children's Aid continues to say, nope, she's not coming back to that foster home. She's staying with the mom. Why? One reason I already explained. This stretch between it's better for a child to live in her family than it is to come into care. That's one. Two, I believe, and there's lots of studies and reports about child protection system, mostly Britain, but some in Ontario, that talk about confirmation bias, I call it that, where once a system, a group of people decide, okay, this mom's pretty good, she wants to do well, she's going to do well, it's better for Neveah to be there. We don't have, this is, okay, wait a minute, don't want to mix them up. Once that decision has been made, then any information that the workers and systems get is seen to support that decision. So you can see, I'll give you an example, because it happens in the reverse all the time too. In fact, more when kids are taken from parents than when they're left with parents. Or I can't say more, I don't have the data. Just as often. The worker could see Neveah's mom always going to meetings, showing up in court as a sign, boy, her mom loves her. Right? And isn't that at the root of things? So if this mom loves her, I've got a lot to work with, she should be there. It can be seen the other way, right? It has been seen the other way. When parents have their child removed, maybe unfairly, certainly the parent thinks unfairly, and the parent continues to call, bother, argue with the children, saying, well, there's just kind of confirmation bias that this mother is a pain in the ass, right? And is unstable, maybe got her own mental health issues, so we can't have the child live with her. That confirmation bias works both ways, but in this case, confirmation bias. Why does it happen? Confirmation bias in this case, this is my belief, and it's a little bit radical. So social workers go to school to be social workers to do good. They want to do good in the world. They might be the wrong people to do child protection investigations, because once they've decided that the good in the world is to keep the family together, recognize that this parent loves the child, it's really hard. Let me at least say it this way, they want to see the good in the family, right?
But they've already seen all of that.
It's amazing what that can happen.
They've seen kids sexually abused, they've seen kids
Well,
going on the street. They're exposed to seeing the bad stuff. And it's so fascinating that it's like a hope. It's a hope.
but it is. But you know what happened between, you're talking about, so Neveah was in the foster home in York, CAS. And then the mom was given back the child and then had these strict conditions on the mom, but the mom moved to Toronto. York found out she moved to Toronto. We have to move the case over to Toronto CAS. And what did Toronto CAS say in court? Oh, we trust this mom because it's a fresh start and the mom works really well with us, which is, to me again, social work, which is saying, those social workers over at York, and just so you know, York CAS and Toronto CAS have a rivalry, but so we're the better children's aid. We know how to work with parents. That mom loves us. We got a good relationship. Things are going to go well now because I can help this mom, which is a social work way of thinking, which is great, but it's not really helpful in child protection. And now social workers would hate me saying this. They hate me saying, because I'm a master's in education. I'm not a social worker, even though I worked in children's aid and stuff. And I don't know if that gives me makes why I see it this way. Maybe it does. But I do know they not to a person, but lots say, come on, Irwin. Social work that's not true. And I think it's just the way of seeing the world that social work is, and I don't think they're the right people doing the protection job.
So what type of people are involved in child protection?
Social workers.
Oh, okay. So.
You have to be a social worker to do child protection. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just had two comments. Number one, in terms of social work, I have a good friend who, 40 years ago, became social and left social work as the court sent a child back to another who had sadly gone a partner. So that has impacted me for a long time in terms of thinking also became stable. But secondly, when we had the service for the being here,
Yes.
afterwards, there was a wonderful bit that people had the missing child division be part of one of the images. She was the female director.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
afterwards, she was outside, we saw her in the spot. And she said something that I never forgotten, which was that, and this is what we did with the movies, just but she said, signs will always go. So she was very optimistic, and not only did we not know who she was, but the things were always happening that she did not know. Where one day this would be solved.
And that's, they did, I don't know how, but they did use DNA.
Because she said it with complete confidence, sorrow and confidence.
I feel the same way in terms of all the things we just discussed, that I feel, while I'm not angry, I'm sad, but I'm hopeful because of things like this. Like I said, this is unique in 45 years of my experience. And so that's hopeful to me, that things change and things have influence. And so, and I do believe that this idea that Neveah's legacy is more than for short years, right? Yeah, that she can make a difference through us. So.
And even though we're not here today, this affected and still affects many people in this world. Everyone loves them, but there are people doing economic arts and mostly in the church system.
Mm-hmm.
Are still haunted.
Yep. That's why it's important. And I appreciate it. Way back in the back. Mhm.
Why is it $400 an hour for mental health? Why are the wait lists capped at 18, 24 months? Why is that still there? Like, the CAS and this judge is still making similar decisions, and kids just keep falling through the cracks. And it's really, this is the angry part of me, the frustrated. Why is it happening? I don't know what actually learning.
Here's my hopeful and my thoughts to that. Because I agree with you. So, I don't know if people have seen in the newspapers, and maybe there were a lot of newspaper articles a few months ago about children's aid with parents who have complex special needs children. So that means a child not with one disability but two. So then they're complicated, complex special needs. So they might have mental health and autism or fetal alcohol syndrome and learning disability or depression. You get it, right? It could be physical disabilities, medical disabilities. And what was happening is the parents weren't able to find supports. It happened in Windsor, in Ottawa, Toronto, certainly Thunder Bay. There's no supports for the family, and the families were exploding, right? Like they couldn't hang together, right? You would know one of the divorce rate for parents who have a complex special needs child is 100 times what an average family would be. The pressure on families is so great. I remember a young disabled person saying to me, I have a disability, but I live with the knowledge that I disable my family. But it's the truth. He said it not to feel sorry for him, but to know it's the truth. And this is not me saying it's not the time right now. What I'm doing is blaming the government. For what I'm saying is that's been happening. And so parents were going to Children's Aid and saying, we can't. Basically, what he was saying, abandoning your child to the Children's Aid. And the Children's Aid has a challenge, right? It's never happened, but they could say, we're not taking your child, but we will. If you just drop your child off at our front door, we will charge you with child abandonment. But the parents are you can imagine the anguish of having to do that because they're saying, we can't, but we believe you can because you're the government, right? You can get the resources. The problem has been the Children's Aid there weren't resources for the Children's Aid even now. Like the workers in Children's Aid said, well, we don't have a foster home for this child because we don't have foster parents that know how to care for this child. And there's no home, group home, residential care to provide. So, but we have these children. So they were having children live in trailers in parking lots in the Children's Aid office space. There was one autistic child, 11 years old, living in an office, office space in Guelph not Guelph, I can't remember, well, I'll say Guelph Children's Aid, I think it was, Guelph Children's Aid, for a year, living in an office, and then Guelph would pay the workers to work 24 hours, shifts, shift work, to just be with the child. This is not legal, it's not supposed to happen, but they were shrugging, like, what are we to do? So recently it brought unions, people from the complex special needs system, the Children's Aid system, teachers who special education, in the province, and again, it sounds like I'm blaming the government. I don't know your political stripe, it's nonpartisan, I'm just saying 1/3 of the elementary school principals in the province, that's thousands, have said we had to send children home from school or tell them they couldn't come to school because we didn't have supports in our school to support them in the classroom because of there's no special ed supports. So these are children living at home. So bring them all together and say it feels like, you use the word, things are collapsing, and they to a person say, no, they're not collapsing, Irwin, they're collapsed. So my hopeful thing to that, because here was the premier before the last election, his answer to that was, we are going to do an audit of Children's Aid. We give $1.6 billion to the Children's Aids in Ontario. And I get his question, how can Neveah happen and other things happen when you have $1.6 billion? Answer me that. I believe, this is the premier, not me, you're wasting that money. You might have recently, he said same thing, the school boards, right? Toronto District School Board, not a penny more, we're auditing you, and if you don't find the savings, we're going to take you over, right? That is recent. So his answer is that, you know what? The audit should come out in a matter of weeks, and he will find, and that audit will find, the ministry will do it. I believe the ministry didn't want to do it. They didn't decide to do the audit because they know where the problems are. They already know. The ministry doesn't need to do an audit. They already know what they'll find. And they will find, and there will be some things that the premier can waive. Look, they went to a training for $50,000 in Niagara Falls, and it was near the casino. See, they're wasting your money. We're talking $1.6 billion, but he will find that. That's not the solution, right, to me. When everything is collapsed, no, we don't have to tear anything down. It's already down. So now I feel like we're at a moment, even after the audit, where we can say to the Premier, okay, Premier, how much money? You did your audit. It didn't change anything. It might make the money be well spent, but it won't change 80,000 kids on a wait list for autism service, or 30,000 for children's mental health service, or no places to place kids. So it won't solve that. How are we going to do that? And it's an opportunity when everything is destroyed, collapsed, say, let's come together and figure out how do we create a system where every child, or as close to, every child and family gets what they need when they need it. We don't know how much money that will cost, because we don't know what that system would look like. We got 1.6 billion in children's aid system. We got 2-point-something billion in children's mental health. We've got a little, not enough, the way it's constructed now, but $1 billion or so in intimate partner violence, and we have we have billions and billions of dollars invested. How can we do things differently so we have better outcomes? That's my hopeful conversation, and I think if I'm a conservative government, I wouldn't mind having, right? Because I got no more money. I can't keep spending and pouring money in and not getting better results. So maybe I'm open to how do we do something different. And I'm hoping that we can push for a conversation like that. That doesn't start with money, but with children. And I know I'm done.
No. It is 1 o'clock, and I know that this voice is getting hoarse. If anyone has like a burning question, maybe we'll take one more if you have a burning question. Otherwise, maybe he's going to be, Irwin can be available for some
Sure,
conversation.
if you want to talk after.
So no burning question. But
Yeah. Let me say thank you to you.
Thank you. We really appreciate your presence with us today, Irwin. Thank you so much. We've been dealing this with ourselves for most of the time, but to have someone on the outside and hearing from Jennifer, we've had stories done here. Just having that external validation is really affirming to us, knowing that we all are on the right track doing good for both Neveah's sake and for the thousands of other children and families who are in this situation. So, blessings to you all. Thank you. Thank you, Irwin.